welcome everybody. Thanks for popping in on a Wednesday. Hope all is going well with you guys. Just want to kind of jump into it quickly because this is an important topic for our Wednesday meetings. You know, we try and cover as many topics as possible. This specific topic, so ADA, Americans with Disability Act, is something that has come up quite often. And to be honest, I have very little answers, if any answers at all. And so we thought it'd be a great idea to bring in some experts to talk about, you know, what that means in general, but then also specifically what it means to you and your individual businesses. So without further ado, I do want to introduce Dan, and he's going to kind of walk us through kind of what this will look like here for this conversation and this webinar. As a quick reminder, feel free to use that Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar. You'll see two little bubbles in the Q&A, and that will get to Dan and to Jason. And we'll try and get to as many questions as possible. I know that this can be a very complex and complicated topic, but you know, after speaking with Dan and Jason, you know, I'm confident that after today's conversation, we'll get a little bit more clarity. And then obviously at the end, they'll kind of walk you through the best ways to get a hold of them and different ways that they can help your business moving forward. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Dan Rudderow of the Rudderow Law Group. And Dan, go ahead and take it away. And thanks again for taking the time to talk with us.
Sure. Thank you, Ruben. Hi, everybody. I want to thank Ruben for inviting Jason and I to speak to you today about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Just real briefly, an introduction to me. I'm an attorney. We have our firm, Rudderow Law Group. We're based out of Orange County, California. We have about 6 attorneys at our firm, and all of our attorneys, our clients, I would say about 90% of our clients are either the owners or managers of mobile home parks, recreational vehicle parks, or also campgrounds. We handle a variety of things at our firm, including rental agreements and evictions. So today we're here to talk about the doing a CASp inspection, and we've got Jason James from MHRV ACE, which is a company that does CASp inspections to go around to your campground and do an inspection of your campground and see what areas of your campground may not comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so I've got Jason here. How are you, Jason?
I'm good, thank you.
Jason, I understand that you're a CASp inspector, which I think stands for Certified Access Specialist. So tell the group today basically what your how many years have you been doing this, and what is your license, and what are you licensed to do?
I've been an inspector working with Access and ADA for over 20 years. The CASp program is less than 10 years old. I think it's right at 10 years old, and I've been doing it for about that amount of time. And yes, it stands for Certified Access Specialist. And I've done probably, I think I'm right at about 2,000 inspections right now total that I've done for lawsuits. So they're happening more than people think they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the Glamping members that we've got on this meeting today are outside of California. So it's my understanding that the Americans with Disabilities Act is, you know, a federal law. So are you able to go outside of California and do CASp inspections in other states?
Yes, I am. And I do it quite often. Yes.
Okay, great. So everyone, I thought what we would do is I'm the lawyer, and Jason is really the expert in this field. He's the one who's got, I think, all the code sections in his brain and can go around your park and immediately identify areas of your park that may not comply with the ADA. But I wanted to, before I start asking Jason questions, Jason and I wanted to kind of just go over a few points about why doing a CASp inspection is really important. The first bullet point we have up here is that it's important, obviously, to be compliant with the law, but there have also been a lot of predator plaintiff law firms that have made it a cottage industry to go around and try to sue campgrounds because maybe their handicap parking is not correct, maybe their park office isn't correct. And if you don't have your park in compliance and they sue you, then they've kind of got you dead to rights. It's almost like strict liability almost. So there have been a lot of these predatory lawsuits, maybe more in California because we're very litigious than in other states where you may be. It's funny, we were talking about how lawyers and plaintiffs would drive around in their cars to different parks to just kind of eyeball them to see if there's ADA issues, but I must be getting old. I'm only in my 50s, but I must be getting old because people are telling me that no, they're using, you know, Google Earth and they're using all of the technology to look at your campground, and they can tell from something like Google Earth whether or not it looks like you are likely in compliance or not in compliance. So the point of this is that we want to be compliant with the law, but we want to avoid expensive lawsuits. We don't want to get sued. And obviously as business owners, we all know that if we get sued, we're going to have to pay potentially a lot of legal fees to our defense lawyer. So the bottom line here today is a CASp inspection, relatively speaking, is not that expensive. It's something you can do very proactively today to get ahead of this, to get your parks inspected, figure out if there's any issues, correct those issues, and then you have a fully compliant ADA park, and you will hopefully, you know, avoid a lawsuit. So we talked about, Jason James told you a little bit about his qualifications, and what we're going to do in this presentation, I'm going to ask Jason to talk about some common things that he sees at campgrounds. But what we wanted to explain to you is that Jason James's company, ACE, that they do many things for you when they provide a service to you. And the first thing they do is they actually physically come out to your park and they walk your park to do a physical inspection of the park and see if they can identify on the ground any ADA problems. So with that, we've got some pictures here and some topics. And so we thought what we'd do is ask Jason to talk about some common ADA issues that he sees, you know, very frequently every time he's doing an inspection of a park. So Jason, the first one here, parking signage. Talk to our audience a little bit about what are the issues that commonly come up with parking signage.
Well, parking signage, it can be very state specific. The ADA, the federal guidelines, only state that a sign must be posted in front of the parking space with the international symbol of accessibility. That's the little guy in the wheelchair there. And then states have different requirements. For example, Nevada, that sign right there looks like a Nevada sign because Nevada is $200 fine. California has to say $250 fine. The vehicle ID required, that's required in certain states, not all. So signage can get a little confusing, and it's one of the things that they love to sue based on. And if they don't sue specifically on signage, it's what they look for. These lawsuits are drive-by lawsuits. They drive around looking for any violation they can, and parking signage is one of the easiest things to see, and that gets them into your parking lot and out of their car checking for more things. So it always starts with signage and parking. You get your signage and your parking right, you can get them to keep driving a lot of times. And that leads me into parking. when you're parking, your parking space has to be 18 feet long. If it's a van accessible space, the access aisle next to it has to be 8 feet wide. And in that whole space between the parking space and the access aisle, it cannot slope more than 2% in any direction. And that's all the way down to the corner of the lines. So once these people get out of their car, they'll set down a level that's about probably, 3-4 inches long, where you can easily find any imperfection. And they'll snap a quick picture and move on. And then a few weeks later, you're being served with papers.
How do you measure the slope when you go out there?
I use a digital level. It's called a smart level. And I measure with percentages. You can measure with degrees or ratios. Percentages is the most universal.
Oh, wow. So what about accessible routes?
Accessible routes, you have to have an accessible route from the public way and from your parking space. The route can slope up to 5% in the direction of travel. It can't slope more than 2% perpendicular to the direction of travel. That's referred to as the cross slope. You see in the picture there, the yellow mats, those we call the detectable warnings. That gets a little confusing because it was required in the 1991 standards. And if your building was built prior to 2010, they can sue stating that it is required because of when your building was built. If it was built after the ADA removed that requirement in 2010, but a lot of states such as California still require them to this day.
It's interesting because you must deal a lot, not only with knowing what the codes are, but then Jason, I guess I have a lot of clients that will call me and say, Dan Rudderow, can this be grandfathered in or can this be not grandfathered in? So when you do an inspection, you understand, well, when you say grandfathered in, you can do the analysis as to when something was installed and whether or not today that is still compliant or not compliant, even if it was installed, 20 years ago.
Well, ADA does not use the term grandfather like other codes do. ADA uses a term called safe harbor, which means if you comply with the 1991 standards, you do not have to bring it into compliance with the 2010 standards. Federal codes are the ones that are retroactive. I don't think any states have retroactive codes to where when a code cycle comes out, like California's latest was 2019, it's all for new building. And that's it, new construction. ADA, you must come into compliance with the most current code unless you are in compliance with the 1991 standards. And that's called safe harbor when you have that.
Okay, great. Interesting. Okay, let's move on. So talk to us a little bit about ramps.
Ramps, there's a difference between a ramp and a curb ramp. If it's just to get you up a curb, it can slope as much as 8.3%, and a handrail is not required if it doesn't rise more than 6 inches. Where handrails are required, the handrails in that picture are not compliant. The handrails, the extensions, have to extend a foot beyond the ramp and they have to be horizontal. And then you have to have guide rails down at the bottom of the handrail to keep the wheelchair from slipping off the side of the ramp. And then that takes us, I'm sorry, was there a question somewhere?
Yeah, it just, I wanted to interrupt. I think the members who are watching this webinar are probably thinking to themselves, well, we have, glamping campgrounds. This is a campground. And, this picture looks like something at a commercial office building. So are all the rules under the ADA the same, at least for path of travel, which I understand path of travel is from the beginning, the entrance of your park, all the way to your park office, which is kind of the area that's open to the public. and areas that are open to the public are subject to the ADA. But in a glamping campground, everything you're talking about today is also required to be in place for a glamping campground, pretty much. There's no exceptions for the glamping places.
There, in the glamping places, I actually did one, I think it was a year ago for Auto Camp up in Yosemite. And what they had is they put their accessible units right near the recreation facilities. And then they had other areas of the campground. There was a fishing lake where they had an accessible route down and an accessible dock for fishing. But every single path doesn't have to be accessible. They have to be able to access their accessible units for glamping, and then they have to be able to access the recreation areas, the showers, you know, if you have a rec room with pool tables and a kitchen, things like that, or a restaurant, anything like that, you have to have accessible routes going to those areas. And you know, you get up into the hills and you do have some steep slopes, and so you end up, if you end up far away, you end up with having to do ramps at parts of it, and signs, because not all routes will be accessible. So you'll put a sign stating where the accessible route is, and you'll put a ramp, sometimes a ramp with a switchback to get them up there.
Oh, cool. I'm sorry to get off track or interrupt you. Talk to us about doors a little bit.
Doors, I'll tell you one of the main things with doors is doorknobs are not compliant. Anything where they have to twist their wrist to open the door is not compliant, and that's another lawsuit that I see quite often. You have to have lever type hardware or standard push-pull rails on the door.
Oh.
And then down at the bottom of the door on the push side, you have to have a kick plate so that they can push it with their wheelchair without it snagging on anything. It's just a smooth sheet metal surface usually. And then the pressure of the door can't exceed. In most states, an exterior door can go up to 15 pounds. In California, unless it's a fire rated door, it can't be more than 5 pounds. And it becomes a real pain because a decent breeze will keep the door from closing all the way at 5 pounds.
Wow. So your clients that you consult with and provide the ACE service, are they having to replace doors or just replace doorknobs? Or it sounds like it's more than a doorknob. It sounds like it's also the kick plate.
Usually it'll be the hardware and the kick plate.
Yeah. And then what about egress signage? This is the Braille thing. How much is this Braille or tactile thing required?
In most places, like a glamping facility, it wouldn't come in to play very often. This is more for if you have a stairway, an exit stairwell that everyone needs to use in case of a fire. You know, when the elevator goes down, it is if you have long corridors with say different intersections in them. I haven't dealt with too many RV associations or glamping. I don't think I've dealt with any that would need Braille signage.
Okay, let's go on to the next ones. Countertops and how high they need to be. I love this photograph, Jason, that you gave us. It's just an awesome photograph because it totally tells us what you're talking about. And it just occurs to me that, you know, most of my clients who own mobile home parks or own RV parks or glamping parks, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've walked in and now I'm starting to be conscious of the fact that, you know, the countertops are probably too high. Or tell us a little bit about what the issue here is with countertops.
Okay, so this is something that I see at almost all RV parks and mobile home parks. The counters are always high. At hotels, they like to do it a lot as well. People don't like leaning down to a 34-inch surface or a 36-inch high surface to sign things and to do their transactions. So what you have to have is you have to have a section of counter that's at least 36 inches long. And in every state outside of California, it can be 36 inches high. If you're in California, it can't be any higher than 34 inches. And
Okay, go ahead.
once they can usually see this from the window. If they get out and start walking around looking for things, they can peek in the window, and it's pretty easy to tell.
Yeah. And then for restrooms, we've all seen the bars and everything. Jason, what's the issue with restrooms? I think you and I offline have had discussions about how RV parks, and I was talking about path of travel being open to the public, but I think you and I have had discussions about how an RV park, for instance, is really open to the public. So all of the park needs to be compliant with ADA. So that means that when people come into the park office and say, can I get an application to rent a space, and they're in the park office and they say, oh, by the way, can I use your restroom? And the park manager says, sure, the restroom's right over there. That means, you know, that restroom definitely needs to be compliant with the ADA, with the things you've showed us in this photograph, like this bathroom with that railing, the grab bar on the side of the toilet, right?
Right. In restrooms, there's tons of issues, tons of little tiny issues. Nothing can be higher than 40 inches. In the soap dispenser, the bottom of the mirror, grab bars have to be a certain dimension. You'll see in that picture right there, the flush handle for the toilet is next to the wall. Always has to be the opposite side from the near side wall. Counters can't be higher than 34 inches in a restroom, and that's ADA and California. Tons of little issues. I get more lawsuits in restrooms where somebody goes in, especially a single accommodation restroom. They go in with their cell phone camera and a tiny little tape measure, and they'll sue if the mirror is at 41 inches high. So, you know, restrooms you want to make sure you have right.
That's amazing. And I was going to make that point, and not to get too cynical here or too paranoid, but when we're trying to tell the attendees on this webinar about people that are trying to make lawsuits, that was kind of my point, that they can come into the park office and say, in a fake way, they could say, can I get an application, and be handed the application, and then while they're there, they can say, oh, can I go to use the restroom? And like you said, go into the restroom with their cell phone and their tape measure. So it's pretty amazing. With stairs, I imagine that most glamping campgrounds and RV parks don't have, you know, more or less, they usually don't have a 2-story building and they have a stair problem. But briefly, what are the issues with stairs?
One thing I can tell you that I see at campgrounds when they do have stairs is you cannot have open risers. Campgrounds, whenever they build a set of stairs, they always build them out of wood, you know, a couple of 2x6s on each step. And they never put anything in the risers. It's an easy catch. You can't have open risers, you know, and then the handrails, you have to have, you know, nice round handrails. You can't just run a 2x4 down each side of the stairs.
Yeah, that's right.
Other than that, it's pretty basic.
Yeah. Okay, moving along. I don't know about everyone who's watching this video, but as a lawyer who has a lot of park owners, I constantly get questions about the wheelchair lift. Can you tell us in which parks or under what circumstances, Jason, the wheelchair lifts are required, and which pools they're not required in?
Well, RV parks and glamping campgrounds would fall under the same criteria as a hotel. It's transient lodging. So you would always have to have an accessible entry into the pool and into the jacuzzi if you have a jacuzzi as well. The chair can't be portable, has to be fixed into the ground, which means if you have a pool and a jacuzzi, you have to have 2 of them. And it has to be self-operational. If somebody goes into the pool early in the morning to swim and needs to use the chair, they need to be able to use it without going to the office and getting an attendant. They have to be able to transfer themselves into it, push the buttons and lower themselves into the pool.
And are you allowed to have, like this one has the blue cover on part of it, but are you allowed to have like covers covering it all up, because the law thinks that the handicapped person can walk up to this chair. It's supposed to be self-using, but we say it's okay that the handicapped person can take the cover off themselves.
Yes, you're allowed to cover it. Most covers remove with Velcro. What you're not allowed to do is there's some covers that that people will lock onto the pool lift with a padlock and a cable underneath. You're not allowed to do that. As long as the cover can be pulled off somewhat easily, yeah, you can cover it.
Yeah, and for our members that are listening to our webinar today, you know, obviously I'm not giving you legal advice, and you shouldn't rely on anything that we're saying today as legal advice, either what I'm saying or Jason's saying. This is just simply a webinar that we put on for people to, you know, point out the issue, you know, tee up the issues. So obviously you should get with your own ADA specialist, and you should get with your own attorney on a case-by-case basis. If you've got a pool in your community and you want to analyze whether or not one of these wheelchair lifts are required. I say that because, not to confuse the issues, but you might say to yourself, well, I know for a fact someone told us we don't have to have a wheelchair lift. Jason, the rules are somewhat different with, like, for instance, mobile home parks. Is there a position that you take that mobile home parks are not as transient, that these are long-term tenants, and that the entire mobile home park is considered private property, such that sometimes the rule is that you do not have to have a wheelchair lift in some of your or in all of your mobile home parks?
For the ADA, as far as they're concerned, if the minimum lease is more than 29 days, it's long-term housing. If the minimum lease is 29 days or less, it's transient lodging. So mobile home parks typically fall into the same criteria as an apartment building or an apartment complex. I have inspected a few RV parks where their minimum lease was 30 days or more, and they did not need to have the pool lift. But the vast majority of RV parks that I deal with are short-term leases, weekends, week-long, you know, leases like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll move off of this subject, but move on to the next slide. But, and I don't mean to over lawyer it, but I do have, just as an aside, I do have an awful lot of clients who have parks that are combination mobile home park and RV parks. And then I've got clients who maybe only have, you know, 2 mobile homes on the property, and the rest of the property is all RVs. So those are just some of the issues to think through. You know, sometimes even our parks are not perfect animals. They can't be perfectly categorized either as mobile home parks and as RV parks. So you might want to get with your attorney. You might want to understand what you have on the ground. And then, you know, from that, Jason is going to say, well, let's look at the leases that you have for all these people in your at your park. So just some things to think about. Okay, let's talk a little bit about bathrooms. And then some of our glamping campgrounds, especially, I think. I have stayed at a glamping campground up in Utah over by Bear Lake, and it was wonderful. But I imagine at these great glamping facilities, they're gonna maybe have more likely than an RV park, maybe they're gonna have like showers. So go ahead, Jason, and tell us some of the issues you see with these shower facilities.
If you offer showers, at least 1 out of every 20 has to be accessible. An accessible shower has to be 60 inches long by 36 inches deep, has to have a transfer seat, has to have a detachable shower head, you know, with a 29-inch hose, all of that. So that's something that I run into almost always. I come across more RV parks and glamping facilities without an accessible shower than I do. And I can, when I do the report, I can provide details and all that for these. It can get confusing.
Yeah, you said 1 in 20 have to have this. What you mean by that is, like, if you have 1 shower or 4 showers. If you had 4 showers in a park, all 4 of those need to be compliant? And is it just when you get past 20 showers that only 1 out of the 20? Or I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it confusing, but what's the rule on that if you have like only a few shower facilities?
It's 5% with a minimum of 1 is what what the code states. So 1 in 20 is what I call it.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I got you. So, okay. And then these are great photographs, Jason. Thank you again for giving us these photographs that we could load onto the slideshow. Talk to us about, I guess, going from the one on the left and then over. What are the issues that you were dealing with these photographed parking spaces?
Well, what I'm showing is, for example, the one on the left, if you don't have an accessible route, or if you have a big facility with a lot of dirt roads, whatever, this is a shower facility right next to the parking space. If it's not feasible, not achievable to put an accessible route through the park to there, you can build a parking space and give them a place to park to get to access it. The one in the middle, I believe, is the same thing. And then the one over on the right, that one accesses directly into a hotel room. They put it right in front of the hotel room so that they don't need to make the entire walkway on either side accessible. You give a little platform in front of that door and a little ramp that goes up to it. And that's all that's required.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Are we done with these slides, these 3 pictures?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the service that, as a CASp inspector, you're providing a service to your clients, and I understand that the first thing that you do is conduct an inspection. We talked about that obviously with these slides. I think we also touched upon this first point, which is that with your campgrounds and your RV parks, basically the entire RV park or the entire glamping park is considered transient or open to the public. So you need to usually do an ADA inspection of the entire park, not just the park office, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think I might have confused our viewers because I was rambling on earlier about path of travel from the front park office, from the entrance of the park only to the park office. And that path of travel is something that you do more for mobile home parks. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
And I think we had someone, when Jason and I did this presentation before, was asking us how long an inspection takes. Basically, for your fees, which I understand are on your website, the fees are basically the same no matter how large your park is, but different parks are obviously going to take different amounts of time. Is it, roughly, what's your average, like 2 hours at the park, or what's your average time you spend out there?
Hour and a half to 2 hours is about the average.
And then you make appointments with your company makes an appointment with the park manager or the owner, and do you like to walk the park with the owner or the manager? Maybe not.
I can flow better without it, but any park manager or owner is welcome to walk with me.
Yeah.
It does take a little bit longer when they do, which I don't mind.
Yeah.
I know this is new to a lot of people, and I have no problem explaining it to them.
That sounds great. Now, in addition to performing the inspection, I understand that in addition to the inspection, that once you get the inspection done, you actually prepare a very detailed inspection report that you later, after the inspection, provide to the client.
Yes, the report is filled with pictures. It's all photo documentation. It has the code references of what needs to be done, where it says it in the code. It has details of how to, what it should look like. The reports are very contractor friendly. And I think I do that because I used to be a contractor, and most people that I deal with, the first thing they're going to do is hire a contractor. So my reports are made so that if you hire a contractor, you can send them the report and they can make out exactly what needs to be done without any problem at all. But I am always available for questions. I have thousands upon thousands of details for everything that I can send out at any given time, or even pictures of what it can look like if that's easier.
Yeah, I've seen, for our members that are watching the webinar today, I've seen your reports, and when people are like, well, what are we getting? You're not going to be getting a 2-page report, a 3-page report, a 5-page report. The ones I've seen Jason do seem like they're always at a minimum 25, 26 pages up to 45 pages. They're very extensive. And in Jason's reports, he actually, like you saw on our slideshow today, Jason actually puts in a photograph of the condition and then a description and code sections. And then, as Jason was saying, and I didn't even realize that, Jason's doing it in a format in which is understandable perhaps to any contractor that you hire, if that becomes necessary to, do some repair work, to change the angle of a ramp or change handicap spacing. So our law firm, Rudderow Law Group, is affiliated with ACE. We work together. And one of the things that we are trying to do as ADA lawyers is we're trying to make sure that the report goes through us, and that our law firm orders the report and our law firm provides you the report. Our law firm does that at no charge to you. The reason why law firms like ours are trying to send you the ACE report is because we are trying, in the world of litigation, to keep the report what they call attorney-client work product, that Dan ordered the report from Jason, so it's Dan's work product. And why that's important is because we can later on, if there was a lawsuit, the lawyers can make an argument that this inspection report that Jason did should not be turned over to the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, that it's a privileged document under the law, and privileged documents under the law do not need to be turned over to the plaintiff. Because if you think about what you're doing, you're creating a report that says a bunch of bad things about your park, potentially. It's going to be a 45-page report that goes into extreme detail about every single thing that's wrong with your park. You don't want to get sued the next day and then have to turn over this report to the other side. You're kind of doing their work for them. So something to keep in mind, whether or not you use ACE or Rudderow Law Group, be sure that you're working with make sure you ask your CASp inspector about whether or not you should facilitate the inspection through an attorney. Jason, I think you talked about this, but briefly, but obviously you're doing an inspection, then you're putting together a report about what's, potentially or is wrong with the park, how the park violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. You're handing that report to the client, and in that report it says what everything is wrong. But I understand you will work with the client in suggesting, you know, a timeline, budgets, contractors, so that the repairs are affordable, so that the business, the park owner, can plan out a budget about how much they spend, over what period of time they spend, which repairs should be done right away, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, yes. There's a timeline in the back of the report for when people want to phase it out. You can put dates in there, and I can work with you on that. But yeah, sometimes it can be a little infeasible to try and do everything at once. So people will put it in their yearly budgets. They'll figure out what their yearly budget is for this, and they'll figure out what they can do on a yearly basis. And I'm always available to help with that.
Great, that's awesome. Okay, so in addition to getting an inspection, and in addition to being provided a report, and in addition to Jason's help in perhaps coordinating the repairs that need to be made, I understand, Jason, that you will also provide the park with this CASp certificate, which I think is like, is it 8.5 by 11? Tell people what this is and who's it issued by, and why this is why we think, at least perhaps theoretically, why this is valuable.
The CASp certificate is the protection that it provides you is mostly in California, but the federal judges are recognizing it more and more. Where it helps is if you have it posted in your window, it's mostly a deterrent. People that see it, that are out looking to file lawsuits, they know you've been inspected and you're taking the proper steps to become compliant. You're either in transition or you are compliant. They'll typically move along. There's enough low-hanging fruit out there right now. They usually, when they see that, they leave you alone. It's something that most attorneys out there tell you, get that certificate and post it in your window as soon as possible.
We like to call it jokingly that it's shark repellent, that it repels us lawyers, us plaintiff lawyers, and it repels us sharks. And like Jason was saying, that for whatever it's worth, I mean, it's this is something you can literally hang in the window. People drive by your park, they might be looking to file a lawsuit. They see this this hanging in your window. It's telling the plaintiff that you've been inspected. So the likelihood is you've made all your repairs. So they're going to maybe move on to the next park or the next, you know, building down the street and skip your park and not try to secretly get into your restrooms with the cell phone and the tape measure.
Exactly.
And then also, at least maybe it's in, well, I guess it's the ADA law, so I guess it would apply to your federal cases and maybe all your state cases. There's, you also, once you do a CASp inspection, you actually, under the law, you get what they call a qualified defendant status. And I know I'm the lawyer, but Jason, just so I'm not doing all the talking, go ahead and give them your understanding of what that means. They get a qualified defendant status later on if and when they are sued in a lawsuit.
Yes, it's what it means is you get a 90-day stay on the lawsuit. When you get sued, most of the fees that you're paying, most of the damages that you're paying are legal fees. These plaintiff attorneys love to run up the fees as quickly as possible. So the 90-day stay means that for 90 days, they cannot run up any fees. So there's the filing fee, and that's about it. And then you get what's called an early mandatory evaluation conference, where basically they decide if you get a referee there to decide if there was even a discrimination caused, or if this is just a bogus lawsuit, which in my opinion, they all are. And also it can be settled right there. You know, there's a negotiation, it's a negotiation conference where it can be settled before anything ever goes to trial, which really helps because when these do go to trial, you're paying your own legal fees as well. So you want to get this done and get it away from you as quickly as possible.
Exactly. Many of you who are listening to this have probably had, maybe not, had your own experience as a business owner getting sued, and for whatever reason, even in these bogus lawsuits. And the bottom line is you're having to pay your attorney to defend your park, which can get very expensive. California is perhaps the most litigious state, or much more litigious than other states in the Midwest. So we're going to be handling more lawsuits out here. It used to be that you would litigate cases and sometimes you can't get to trial for 2 years. And now with the whole COVID pandemic, the courts are just overwhelmed, just like hospitals are. And they're pushing back court appearances. They're pushing back status conferences. Basically, because of COVID, it's taking longer to get things resolved in the court system. And so what Jason's pointing out is if you had a CASp inspection done, one of the benefits of that inspection is later on, if you were sued, you can go in front of the judge and try to, you know, do these things that Jason said to accelerate the process, to hopefully one way or the other hurry up and get it resolved earlier than later. Because if you get it resolved later, that may cost you a lot of money and a lot of time with these lawsuits that tend to go on forever. So it's something, it's another perk, or it's another benefit to doing the CASp inspection, something that's very valuable if you're ever finding yourself on the receiving end of one of these lawsuits. Finally, there's even a tax incentive. Go ahead, Jason, and talk briefly about possible. Obviously, you have to consult with your own CPA or your own tax attorney, but just so that people are thinking about that and they ask their own CPA about that, tell us what your understanding, Jason, is of the possible tax benefits.
The tax incentive is federal, so it's through the IRS, so it's not state specific. From what I understand, up to $10,000, you can get 50% of that back as a credit, not just a write-off. Then you can still write off the entire amount. When people come to me, if they're not entangled in a lawsuit and they come to me saying that they want to make out a timeline and a budget for their transition period, my advice usually is try and keep it right around $10,000 a year. It maximizes your write-off, maximizes your credit, and it maximizes the advantages that you get.
That's awesome. That's great. And then finally, this is our last slide, and then we can take some questions. If you're interested in having ACE do an inspection for you, you can reach out either by, you can Google MHRV ACE, and the contact information, I believe, is on ACE's website. Right here we have the email address. You can email Linda at mhrvace.com, and I understand that the Linda person will take the intake information for you, and then Linda will coordinate an inspection of your park with Jason and his calendar. Or you can call ACE at this phone number, this 949 phone number. In addition, I understand, talking with Jason offline, that his company is willing to give a $100 discount on the CASp inspections for all American Glamping Association members. So this is an extra perk. And then finally, I'm going from the bottom to the top of this slide. There's mentioned there in the top paragraph about an ADA hotline. Ruben and Jason and I We have some experience with the CampCalNOW organization that's in California, and we just wanted to mention that to you as another resource. CampCalNOW, it's Camp, C-A-M-P, then Cal, C-A-L, and then Now, N-O-W. CampCalNOW actually has a ADA hotline that people can use to get ADA questions answered. So if you want more information about their ADA hotline, then just reach out directly to CampCalNOW. And with that, I'm going to ask my IT person here, Chris Long, if he'll play on my computer and pull up any of the questions that maybe we've gotten through for the last 45 minutes during our seminar. So we'll start at the top. Thanks, Chris. The first question we got was from Donna, and Donna says, are there ever situations where there is no ADA requirements at all, i.e. for rustic natural camping in NYS? Is that New York State, I would think? You think, Chris? Yeah. New York State? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
The short answer is no. There are never, I have yet to come across a situation. If you allow customers or any of the public to come on your property uninvited as a guest, or then you are required to have, at the very least, an ADA path of travel to the leasing office, to and parking. If you're registered historic, there are some exceptions, but very, very few.
Okay, thanks, Jason, for that. And obviously, Donna, you can consult with a ADA expert if you have more specific questions about your particular rustic campground. The next question is from Blake Smith. Blake Smith asks, what is the threshold for having an ADA compliant room? Does a property with just 10 rooms have to have one compliant room?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it starts with one. It's in the ADA. I can pull up that chart right now if you'd like, but at the very least, you must have one room, and it would fall under the same criteria as a hotel, where if you're providing, in hotels, if you're providing bathrooms in the room, the first room has to have a roll-in shower, things like that.
Okay. And then John Latimer asks, being in the mountains, we have rough terrain, and getting a less than 5-degree slope will be nearly impossible. Are there exemptions possible?
Yes, there are. It's not always going to be feasible. It's not always going to be achievable to make it happen. You're going to have rough terrain. You're going to have structural issues. And so the ADA does take that into account, that some things are technically infeasible. It's something that I would assess while I was out there, and it wouldn't be the first time that we have had a campground where it is technically infeasible to get to a certain area. Some states, in some states, it states that where an item is technically infeasible, you must provide equivalent facilitation. Equivalent facilitation could be them, if they have a way of contacting the manager's office from their unit. It could be the manager bringing a golf cart down and driving them to where they need to go. It could be any one of those little things. It's going to be an inconvenience, but it's just not feasible to put a ramp in all the time.
Okay, very good. We have another question. This person wasn't interested in identifying himself or herself, but he or she said, so for a restroom, everything has to be 100% perfect. There is no benefit of making a good faith effort. And I kind of understand where this person's coming from, because talk about that and talk about, is there anything such as, you know, substantial compliance, which we see in the law sometimes, as opposed to, you know, quote, 100% perfect compliance?
Unfortunately, and this is going to sound really cynical, but this is, and I really believe the reason most of you are here is this is about avoiding lawsuits more than accessibility. You can put forth a good faith effort. You can make a restroom accessible, and people can reach 41 inches to get to the soap dispenser. They can get into the restroom if the doorway is only 29.5 inches wide. But if they find the one thing, if somebody is out to sue you, they're going to look for that one little thing that they can sue you on. Can you fight it and win? Yes. But the reason these people sue is because they know it's going to cost you, 3 to 4 times as much to fight it as it is to settle with them. They're all out for a quick settlement. And so they're going to look for any little thing they can. I would love to tell you that a good faith effort, that getting a place 90% accessible will get you there, but it's the little details that they will find to try and file a lawsuit on you.
Thanks, Jason. That's you put it very well. Ruben, I don't think we have any more questions. So on behalf of myself and on behalf of Jason, I really want to thank you and your members for inviting us to the meeting today. And I hope that you guys all found it informative.
Thank you, Dan.
That's okay. All right. Well, we're gonna, Jason and I are gonna sign off. So everyone, wherever you are in the United States, have a great day.